You're listening to 106.9 Tune FM here on the home of UNE's student-powered radio. I'm Ash, and today I'm joined in the studio by the wonderful Dr. Sharon Campbell, all the way from the University of Tasmania. Now, if you've been around on Facebook lately and you're based in Armidale, you'll likely have seen that the Armidale Regional Council has partnered with the University of Tasmania for a new study on the impacts of wood heating versus reverse cycle air conditioning for heating over the winter months. And as anyone around is very well aware, it's starting to get a bit cold. So we've got Sharon in today to talk about that study, to talk about her experience and background and what it means and how it's going to affect people. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Ash, for having me on. This is such an important topic for Armidale.
Definitely. And, being from Tasmania, are you based in Tasmania right now as well?
Yeah, so we are getting slightly cold. We've had a pretty warm run, to be honest, but it is starting to turn, especially in the evening. So, yeah, very similar weather conditions to you guys in Armidale.
Yeah, for sure. I moved up here for the cold, so that's always good. Hopefully it gets a little bit colder lately. But I thought just to get us started, you could introduce yourself to our audience, tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be involved in this study and your interest in it.
Absolutely. So I'm based at the Menzies Institute for Medical Research, which is the medical research arm of the University of Tasmania, and I'm in the environmental health research team. So my background is in health policy, but I've done a PhD in climate change and health and really concentrated on extreme events and how they impacted the health systems and the health of communities. And the things that were really important that I looked at were heat waves and bushfires, mainly bushfire smoke, because it's bushfire smoke that affects lots of people in a bushfire as opposed to a bushfire front. And heat waves, obviously, really broad reaching and impacts on lots and lots of people. So I loved doing the research in my PhD, and I was lucky enough to get a postdoctoral fellowship in that same area afterwards, which is great. And so lots of people probably haven't necessarily thought about it, but wood heater smoke is pretty much the same as bushfire smoke. So the health impacts from bushfire smoke, which are wide and varied, are pretty much exactly the same as the health impacts from wood heater smoke. The difference is that bushfires go out and eventually stop, but wood heater smoke lasts for a really long time in areas like Armidale, like you see it from kind of now all the way through to maybe October-ish. And through those really cold winter months, it can be really quite severe, and you can have really poor air quality in Armidale. And so we know that it impacts the people of Armidale, and this project is trying to the early stages, the very first step of trying to do something about that.
Yeah. And this is sort of building on a previous study done in Tasmania, right?
Well, yeah, so many years ago, there was a project that was based in Launceston in the northern part of Tasmania, and that was funded through the sale of one of the assets. There was an opportunity to incentivise people to switch their wood heaters out for reverse cycle air conditioners. And Launceston is not dissimilar to Armidale in a way that, it's quite cold over winter. It sits in a valley, and so the wood smoke over winter can be quite severe. And there was a huge number of people that actually took that opportunity to switch out from wood heaters to some sort of electric heating that didn't have that same level of pollution. And what they found was that the pollution level across Launceston dropped dramatically. And there was a study done by my boss, actually, Faye Johnston, and she was able to show that lots of lives were saved. There was lots of cost saving in terms of people not being admitted to hospital, and mainly in terms of lung and heart issues, so asthma attacks and things like that. So we know that it actually saves lives and it saves money by switching out.
Yeah, it's very contentious. I think I've seen a lot of people arguing both for and against it on the local pages, and one of the things that comes up a lot that I've seen is the money, particularly when it comes to the colder months and reverse cycle electricity. So I guess, we've spoken a lot about the health impacts, the environmental impacts on it. What about the financial impacts of making the switch from wood heating to a reverse cycle or another form of electrical heating? How is that going to affect people who
Yeah.
might be from a lower socioeconomic?
You're absolutely right. The cost is definitely a factor, and it can go kind of either way. So, if you source your own wood, for example, like if you have a big property and you can cut down your own trees and you have the ability to do that, then obviously that form is a lot cheaper. Um, the flip side is, though, that if you don't have access to some good quality dry wood, then those prices are going up all the time as well, just electricity prices, and you can't actually do a lot about that. But you can do quite a bit about making your home more comfortable and warmer through some really simple ideas about, stopping drafts and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we're doing as part of this study is that we're offering people that participate in the study a free home energy audit. And what that will do is allow them to work out where they're losing heat and where they're losing electricity through really simple changes, giving them the opportunity to implement some of those changes through the time of the trial when they're swapping out their wood heater. So, yeah, we recognise that cost is an issue. There's also the bigger picture of cost for the community, and that's a really tough one for people that are on a lower budget to take that into account, because a lot of people are just living day to day at the moment, and we really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's certainly a very difficult thing, and I do see that the study takes into account renters as well. So at the moment, it's only homeowners who are eligible to participate in this study. Kind of a bit hard for a renter to decide that they want to participate in the study, and the homeowner's like, I think I'm good there.
Yeah.
But you're actually, this is funded by Asthma Australia,
Mhm.
and so $3,000 is going towards people who are chosen to participate to remove, or is it remove and install, or just install
Yep,
the
I can
reverse
run you
cycle?
through that. So,
Yeah.
so you're right. Asthma Australia is actually funding all of this project, and a big chunk of the project funds go towards the participants in the study, where we can take up to 25 people in the study, or 25 households, I should say, in the study. And those 25 households will be subsidised up to $3,000 to remove their wood heater and replace it with a reverse cycle air conditioner. And that will all be operated through the council, through a selected contractor to do that work. The householder and the contractor who will do the work will work with each other to work out the best form of heating for that particular household. And that $3,000 just goes towards that cost. So in some cases it will cover the cost, in some cases it will cover most of the cost. And so, yes, removing the wood heater entirely, because that's really the only way that we can ensure that the pollution stays right down.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk me through the methodology of the study itself?
Yeah,
Like when it
sure.
comes to gathering data to compare between, before and after?
So we're calling it a pilot or a trial. And really what we're trying to find out here is, what are some of the barriers to people doing this, and what are some of the things that make this work? So that's why we're working with a really small number of households and incentivising those households. So we will log the temperature of those households through a 12-month period. So we'll have a tiny little temperature logger that will just pop in their house in a really inconspicuous spot, and that'll just keep track of the temperature. And we'll also be interviewing the participants in that household 3 times during the 12 months of the trial. So that'll be before we do the switch, during the switch, and then at the end of the trial. And what we hope to gather is working out what things worked, what things didn't work, and that will all go to then informing policy around suggestions for moving this in a much larger scale going forward. So it's a bit of a baby trial, but this is the only way that we can learn how to make better policy in the future.
Yeah, and I know that it's very different in larger cities, in metropolitan areas, in rural areas and regional areas. At least from what I've seen, people are actually quite attached to their wood heaters. I think it gives them a sense of comfort, maybe. or even just the vibes, as it were. Um, what has been the response to the pilot so far that you've seen?
Yeah, so we've been recruiting through the council and advertising through the council. I should say the Armidale Regional Council are partners in all of this as well, and they've been fantastic to help us identify, just navigate this whole space. And so we've had a really positive response. We've had quite a few queries. We've had people joining up. We want to get as many people as we can, even though recognising we probably won't be able to select all of those people. At the moment, we're actually over-prescribed, which is fantastic because it gives us the opportunity to select the people that need it the most. So we'd really encourage people that if they're thinking about making that switch, removing their wood heater and replacing it with a reverse cycle air conditioner, we'd really ask them to consider popping onto the Armidale Regional Council website, and you'll see on their news and update section there's a link to a short survey that will let us know who's eligible, and then if they are eligible, they'll be able to put their name down as an expression of interest for the trial.
Oh, fantastic! Because my house, we have a wood heater and we also have a reverse cycle air conditioner. So we kind of get both. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of houses in the same sort of vein. So I imagine that's probably a little bit easier. Just involves taking out the wood heater, for example. But one thing that sticks out to me a lot is, and speaking from personal experience here, when it hits winter, I'm someone who has asthma, so the cold air coupled with the smoke, and then for people who have experienced the bushfires, that smoke could be a trigger for them as well. But there's also that smell that comes with it of people who use chemical-based fire starters. So is the pollution and the health impacts, does that take into account things like those like white chemically things that people use to start their fires?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, most of the research on this area and bushfire smoke as well is really looking at a thing called particulate matter. And so, particulate matter is just what you see when there's a bushfire, when there's wood heater smoke haze. The haze is actually made up of really, really, really tiny particles. And those particles are so small that we breathe them in. They can actually enter into our bloodstream and cause us a whole bunch of harms. Right throughout our bodies. But people like you that experience asthma, like me as well, when I go into those situations, I get a really immediate reaction. And, it hits my lungs straight away. Those fire starters, not as well researched, but they tend to only be really short-lived. And that's the whole point. They're called fire starters. So we know a lot about PM2. We call it PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5, and 2.5 is the size. That's a 2.5 micron, so it's really tiny, you can't see it. So that PM 2.5 research is really widespread right around the world, and there's just so much evidence now to say that inhaling and being exposed to those PM 2.5 particles has issues for us right across the board. So lungs, heart, even people that are diabetic. There's emerging evidence around PM 2.5 being dangerous for our brains and our bones as well. So I think we'll just keep seeing lots more research in that space.
Yeah, for sure. And will you be making the trek up to Armidale at some point throughout the study to check in on things?
I actually really love Armidale. I did my health science degree at UNE. So
Oh, amazing.
yeah, so I was there as a residential student, but I had lots of trips to Armidale. I love the area. I think it's really beautiful. So I'm really looking forward to coming up as soon as I can.
Yeah, you'll have to swing by the studio and
I'd
visit
love
the
to. Thank
campus and
you.
see what it's all about. Is there anything that I haven't brought up or forgot to mention that you think is really important in terms of the study or getting involved or just in general?
Yeah, I'd say probably the other thing that people consider when they're trying to toss up if they should make the switch is you've spoken about the comfort and the warmth and the feeling of having a wood fire. Absolutely agree. There's also the hassle, and so you've got to. Most people will buy wood. You need to find a reputable wood cellar, so the wood needs to be dry. You need to have somewhere to store it that's out of the rain. Then you need to split it, and then you need to carry it into your house, and then you need to, open the wood heater and chuck it in at regular intervals. As people get older or they have more mobility issues, all of those things get a lot harder. And so generally we'll bundle all of those into the hassle of having a wood heater. It can sometimes start to outweigh all of those other emotions of feeling warm and comfortable and having your wood heater. So at that point, people are really going, it's much easier if I can just walk in, turn on the air conditioner, reverse cycle air conditioner heater, and then I've got instant heat. I don't have to wait around for the wood heater to warm up. I can set it on a timer, and so I know that the house is warm when I get home. And of course, the other part of that is if you're installing a reverse cycle air conditioner, an air conditioner comes with it. And so as we get warmer, as climate change sees much warmer temperatures, a lot of houses, even in Hobart, houses are starting to install air conditioners, and I'm sure that's the same in Armidale as well. So there's sort of that dual benefit of having instant heat plus having the cool that starts to outweigh the hassle of having a wood heater over time.
Yeah, for sure. And just finally, you mentioned earlier about hoping that the long-term impacts of this study and future studies like it will be to inform policy. What sort of policy would you like to see come from this?
Well, that's unfortunately not up to me. It's up to lots of other people. So what we do as researchers is we try to inform policy where we can. So this pilot is the start of trying to inform that policy. You know, there's, as you said, there's so many different factors here. There's people that are really attached to their wood heaters, people that find it cheaper. And so ultimately, we're not going to see a situation where wood heaters are banned. I think that's actually really unlikely, even though from a health point of view, that would actually make a lot of sense. But, we're not all about health. We're about lots of other social factors as well. But ultimately, what we'd like to see is less and less wood heaters as better alternatives come in. One of the other things that we're researching in conjunction with the Fire Centre, which is part of the University of Tasmania, is what we call ULEBs, which stands for ultra low emission burners. So they're a type of wood heater that actually have really low emissions and not the high emissions that we see from regular wood heaters. So, in research with those types of burners, we might start to see wood heaters that are actually feasible to use that don't cause the pollution that we've got right now, and that solves some of the hassle as well. So there's lots of exciting research in this space.
Yeah, no, it sounds really, really fascinating, and I'm very excited to hear more, and to see what comes from this study. I know I'll be carrying my puffer with me a little bit
Yes.
more regularly throughout the winter months.
I'll be carrying mine when I come to Armidale, unfortunately, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
That's part of life, isn't it? But yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on to Tune FM today with me, for starting this study, and for all your great work in the sector. It's a pleasure to have you on.
That's been lovely. Thanks so much. I look forward to popping in next time I'm in Armidale.
Yeah, me too. You're listening to 106.9 Tune FM, the home of UNE's student-powered radio.